Some of them might save Middle-earth, and some of them might destroy it. From fateful decisions to political intrigue to the greedy pursuit of treasure. The characters of the Rings of Power have lived dramatic lives. Here's what you need to know about all of them. Galadriel is no stranger to fans of The Lord of the Rings. The Lady of Lorien is one of the most memorable and important characters Tolkien ever created, and Cate Blanchett's portrayal of her in the movie adaptations is nothing less than iconic. The version of Galadriel we meet in The Rings of Power, however, may not be the one you're expecting. This story begins in a time of relative peace, after the defeat of the Dark Lord Morgoth and the world-shattering War of Wrath that closed out the First Age. Galadriel is considerably more brazen at this point, as she hunts down the remnants of Morgoth's forces to avenge her brother's death. After she completes her mission and abandons her journey back into the west, Galadriel encounters Halbrand, a mortal man whose fate is apparently intertwined with that of the future Elf Queen. Before that fateful encounter, though, she spends time with Elrond in the elven realm of Lindon, and eventually even sets foot on the island realm of Númenor. Considering the breadth of these travels, it's clear that this more reckless Galadriel is one of the main characters of the Rings of Power, if not the outright protagonist. During the Third Age, Elrond is one of the most highly respected and experienced elf lords still in Middle-earth. You're probably well aware of his role in Tolkien's more famous works. In The Hobbit, he briefly allows Thorin Oakenshield's company to stay in Rivendell. In The Lord of the Rings, he heals Frodo after the attack on Weathertop, hosts the Council of Elrond, and then takes one of the last ships into the west. The Rings of Power features a very different Elrond. At this point, still young and determined, Elrond plays a part in the politics-heavy Lindon storyline.
It is said the wine of victory is sweetest for those in whose bitter trials it is fermented.
He also pays a visit to the dwarves of Khazad-dûm, suggesting the young elf lord's politicking may extend beyond his homeland's borders. You can expect far greater things from Elrond as the series goes on. Throughout the Second Age, he proves himself as a military commander during the Elves' conflict with Sauron, establishes Rivendell, takes possession of Velia, the Ring of Air, and helps overthrow the Dark Lord in the War of the Last Alliance. There can be little doubt that these events will be depicted in the Rings of Power, and that, by the end of the series, this young elf will have grown into the great leader he is destined to become. One of the most exciting aspects of the Rings of Power is that it will bring characters who have previously been little more than legends to the screen. Gil-galad is the High King of the Noldor and ruler of Lindon, the elven realm that lies in the western regions of Middle-earth. A wise leader and fierce warrior, Gil-galad appears in a poem recited by Samwise Gamgee, which tells of his keen lance, shining helm, silver shield, who eventually falls into darkness. Indeed, you could reasonably argue that Gil-galad, as a keen military commander and sworn enemy of Sauron, is the most important elf to live in Middle-earth during the Second Age. In the Rings of Power, Gil-galad appears to be exactly as magnificent as his reputation suggests. When Galadriel returns from her last mission to the north, he presides over a ceremony granting her and her soldiers passage into the west. He wears golden robes during the ceremony and places a crown of golden laurels on Galadriel's head. Later in the season, the Elf King hosts a magnificent feast for a few dwarven visitors, including Durin IV. These are mere hints towards Gil-galad's greater importance, of course, but it seems certain we'll see much more of him in the coming years. A skilled smith who witnesses the many calamities of the First Age, Celebrimbor is best known for forging the Rings of Power. He first makes several lesser rings crafted under the tutelage of Sauron disguised as the elf Annatar, the Lord of Gifts. Then, by himself, he creates the more powerful 3 rings. After Sauron reveals himself and forges the One Ring, things go south pretty quickly for Celebrimbor. In the second episode of the first season, Celebrimbor personally asks for Elrond's assistance in building a tower that will house the most powerful forge ever created by elves, humans, or dwarves. It's a foreboding look at the master craftsman's dark fate, though we likely won't see his fall from grace until much later in the series. Some fans have complained about Charles Edwards' look as Celebrimbor, but however cranky they currently feel, fans might rest a little easier knowing he is a renowned actor of both stage and screen. He starred in shows such as The Crown and Downton Abbey, as well as productions of Richard II and Much Ado About Nothing. In short, Celebrimbor is in very good hands. In 2019, Deadline reported that Game of Thrones star Joseph Malley had been cast as the show's villain, Oren. Since Sauron is the principal threat to Middle-earth during the Second Age, this led many to assume Oren was a production codename and that Mali was, in fact, playing the Dark Lord himself. They were half right. As it turns out, thanks to a leaked character sheet, Oren is indeed a pseudonym for a character named Adar. The sheet describes the character as an elf, tortured, corrupted, turned into a warlord. Subsequent leaks and rumors suggest Adar will lead an orc band hunting an enigmatic artifact, and that he will face off against Sauron. Most intriguingly, Adar may be revealed to be one of Galadriel's brothers, perhaps the same brother she's avenging as the series begins. This would be an astonishing break from Tolkien's canon. Imagining Galadriel's brother as a corrupted warlord borders on the sacrilegious. At the very least, it'll be fascinating to see how McKay and Payne might attempt to pull off a twist like this. Prince Durin IV is said to be one of the most important dwarven characters in the Rings of Power. But who is he? Durin IV is a Second-Age ruler of Khazad-dûm and a bearer of one of the Rings of Power. His name is important. Every once in a while, a prince or king of the House of Durin is born who is almost identical in appearance and manner to Durin the Deathless, eldest of the dwarves, who first awoke many millennia ago. These dwarves are named Durin and are believed by their kin to be a genuine reincarnation of the original. In total, 6 dwarves have been given the name Durin throughout Middle-earth's history. While it's currently unclear what specific part Prince Durin will have to play in the series, it will have something to do with Celebrimbor's forge, and you can safely bet he'll be playing it from within the kingdom of Khazad-dûm, later known as Moria. Tolkien writes in The Lord of the Rings that even as Sauron's forces spread across Middle-earth, Khazad-dûm remained unconquered due to the strength and bravery of its people. Prince Durin will likely lead them for much of the show's run. The dwarven storyline in The Rings of Power poses a curious question. If Durin IV is the Prince of Khazad-dûm, who's the king? The answer? Durin III. Despite the fact that, in Tolkien's writings, Durin III and Durin IV live thousands of years apart, they'll be brought together as father and son in the new series by its condensed timeline. This will avoid huge time jumps and associated issues with human characters' mortality.
You've always said sandstone in your granite as far as the elves were concerned.
In the original text, Durin III has a much more explicit role in the events surrounding Sauron's rise than Durin IV. This is the king who is first gifted a ring of power by Sauron, and who later leads his dwarves into battle against the Dark Lord before retreating to Khazad-dûm and closing the doors of Durin for good. It should be expected that the relationship between father and son will be severely tested as the days grow darker for the dwarves of Khazad-dûm. Rounding out the show's dwarven protagonists is Princess Disa. Currently, there's not a lot known about Disa. In the second episode of The Rings of Power, she's introduced as Durin IV's strong-willed and loving wife and the mother to 2 very energetic children. A leak that occurred before the show premiered suggests that Season 1 will include a dwarven religious sect. Given that Disa can be seen singing at a dwarven ceremony in one of the trailers, could Disa be a leader of this group or some kind of priestess? How might she play into the politics of the subterranean kingdom? What impact will she have on the fates of the 2 Durins? Only time will tell. Arondir was created for the Rings of Power. He's one of the Sylvan elves, who populate the Greenwood and Lothlorien. But Arondir's journey takes him far beyond these forest realms. Arondir falls into a forbidden romance with Bronwyn, a human woman, while stationed at a watchtower in the southern lands. The storyline seems inspired by other human elf romances in Tolkien's work. Aragorn and Arwen in The Lord of the Rings and Beren and Luthien in The Silmarillion are prominent examples, though it has yet to be revealed what troubles might underlie Arondir and Bronwyn's relationship.
Twice in known history has a pairing between elves and humans even been attempted, and on each occasion, it ended in tragedy.
Somewhat less murky is the setting for this drama. Bronwyn's village, Tir-Arad, was created for the series, but the name, literally near Harad, suggests it's close to Harad, a mysterious region located south of Mordor. The view from Arondir's watchtower reveals a lot about this land. The geography of the valley below bears a striking resemblance to the river Anduin, the hills of Emin Arnin, and the Efelduoth mountain range that makes up Mordor's western border. This could mean much of Arondir's Season 1 story takes place in and around the forests, later known as Ithilien, the perfect home for a lovesick wood elf. An inhabitant of Tir-Arad, Bronwyn is a healer and a single mother to son Theo. By episode 2, there is still little else known about the woman who loves Arondir. However, she quickly proves her resourcefulness and determination when she saves Theo from a goblin that has burrowed up from beneath her house. This occurs shortly after she returns from her hometown, which has been destroyed under mysterious circumstances. Using the severed head of the goblin, she convinces her fellow villagers to abandon their homes in the event that Tir-Harad suffers the same fate. Early in the series, Theo discovers a broken sword hidden in the floorboards of a barn. The weapon is currently a total mystery. For a while, speculation ran rampant that it could be Gurthang, the sword of Durin IV. However, rights restrictions prevent Amazon from using material found solely in the Silmarillion. Now that we can watch the full episodes and have gotten a good look at the design of the sword's hilt and pommel, and Sauron's mark on the blade, this proves that it's definitively a weapon of the Dark Lord. It's clear that Theo has some kind of connection to the wider events of the Second Age, and that the Tir-Harad storyline will reach far beyond the secret romance at its core. Another character created for the Rings of Power, Halbrand is a mortal man running from his past. By episode 2, we still know little about the mysterious figure, though he clearly has some compassion. As Halbrand and Galadriel attempt to survive on a makeshift raft, the elf is dragged under the waves during a powerful storm. Halbrand dives in and rescues her from a watery grave. This, of course, is after he abandoned several other survivors from his ship when it was attacked by a giant sea monster. In one of the character posters for the show, Halbrand is seen holding a sword with a horsehead pommel. While it might be easy to assume that this has something to do with the Rohirrim, it's worth remembering that the Horse Lords of Rohan don't exist at this point in Middle-earth's history. Halbrand's sword likely indicates he is Númenórean. Tolkien writes in Unfinished Tales that the Dunedain loved horses and riding and became so attuned to their steeds that they could call them to their side by merely thinking it so. There have also been images of him wearing a tunic marked with a solar symbol similar to one found on another character poster. Fans have speculated this icon may belong to the Númenórean noble Elendil. That's as far as our knowledge of Halbrand goes currently. It'll probably be a while before we find out who he really is, what he's running from, and what he might become. The Stranger is by far the most mysterious character in the Rings of Power. He arrives in Middle-earth via fireball, which can be seen streaking across the sky. The relationship between the Stranger and the Harfoot Nori, who first encounters him, seems to be a central storyline for the series. The Stranger could be a wizard, but he probably isn't. Even if he is, he almost certainly won't be the one you're thinking of. Gandalf, Radagast, and Saruman all come to Middle-earth in the Third Age, long after the events of the show take place. The Stranger might be one of the two blue wizards, but it seems odd to introduce one with such fanfare and not the other. All things considered, it's not particularly plausible that the Stranger is one of the Istari. So, who is he? Well, you might want to consider a character you won't find elsewhere on this list. Someone who is guaranteed to play a major role in the series. One of the most famous aspects of Sauron's story during the Second Age is that he comes to the elves disguised in a form so fair that few suspect his true identity. What better way of delivering a truly shocking twist than to make the audience believe they're watching a kindly wizard befriend a humble Harfoot when they are, in fact, witnessing the return of the new Dark Lord. Nobody expected to see hobbits in the Rings of Power, mostly because they don't show up in Middle-earth's history until the Third Age, and yet, here they are, or at least their ancestors. The Harfoots, like the hobbits, are short and have hairy feet, but that's where the resemblance ends. The Harfoots are a nomadic group, still searching to find their place in the world. The shows featured Harfoots, Nori, Brandyfoot, Poppy Proudfellow, Largo Brandyfoot, and Marigold Brandyfoot encounter the Stranger on their travels, which changes their lives forever. The series' depiction of this tribe of halflings is almost entirely lifted from Concerning Hobbits, the first chapter of The Lord of the Rings. This prologue explains that, in the so-called Wandering Days, hobbits inhabited the upper vales of Anduin to the east of the Misty Mountains. According to Tolkien, the Harfoots had much to do with dwarves in ancient times, and long lived in the foothills of the mountains. Only when the fortress of Dol Guldur rose in the early Third Age did the hobbits migrate westwards, eventually settling in the lands that became the Shire. Clearly, these aren't the simple merry gardeners we all know and love, but the Harfoots' tale should nevertheless offer up a tantalizing opportunity to explore the secret history of one of Middle-earth's most remarkable races.
I can't help but feel there's wonders in this world, beyond our wandering.
Because of the show's condensed timeline, we can assume the movers and shakers of late Númenórean history will be present from early on, including Isildur, son of Elendil and future king of Gondor. At this point in time, Isildur is heir to the lordship of Andunia, a seaport located on the island's west coast. Notably, he is not yet king and at the beginning of the story does not expect to become one. As the days grow darker and Sauron's shadow falls upon Númenor, however, Isildur will doubtlessly be drawn into the Dark Lord's deadly schemes. If you're familiar with The Lord of the Rings, you know this ends tragically. One report claims he'll accompany Galadriel, Elendil, and the Númenórean queen, Míriel, on a maritime journey to Middle-earth. Where exactly are they going and why? Your guess is as good as ours. Better known to Lord of the Rings fans as High King of the Dúnedain and founder of both Gondor and Arnor, Elendil's rise to glory and eventual death at the hands of Sauron is sure to be a key storyline in the Rings of Power. Early on, though, he's merely a Númenórean lord, albeit a powerful one. It's rumored that Elendil will head up recruitment efforts and lead the Númenórean fleet on its voyage to Middle-earth. Tolkien writes in the appendices to The Lord of the Rings that the Númenóreans began to settle in Middle-earth around the year SA 1200, a few hundred years before the forging of the Rings of Power. Since the series condenses the timeline to a single generation, it makes sense that Season 1 will see the island nation spread its influence across Middle-earth. Elendil, it appears, will lead that effort. As the seasons go by, expect to see him come increasingly into conflict with Pharazôn, king of Númenor, as the latter falls under the influence of the Dark Lord.
The past is dead. We either move forward or we die with it.
An epic saga is only as great as its monsters. While Sauron will undoubtedly be doing much of the heavy lifting in this department in the Rings of Power, Númenórean King Pharazôn is nothing to be trifled with. Pharazôn the Golden becomes king of Númenor after forcibly marrying Míriel, daughter of Tar-Palantir, the previous king. After Sauron conquers much of Middle-earth and declares himself king of men, uninfuriated, Pharazôn invades the mainland, swiftly and decisively defeating the Dark Lord. When the Númenóreans take Sauron back to their homeland as a hostage, however, he quickly gets to work corrupting them for his own ends. Pharazôn's subsequent fall into darkness has world-changing consequences. It appears that, at the beginning of Season 1, Pharazôn is merely a subject of Tar-Palantir and an advisor to his future wife, Míriel. The show's Pharazôn is a brilliant, authoritative, and self-important type, which suggests the character's wicked personality is already fully formed, even if his tragic fate has yet to play out. Míriel is the daughter of Tar-Palantir, the king of Númenor, and the unwilling wife-to-be of Pharazôn. Tolkien wrote little about Míriel, aside from the disturbing nature of her marriage, but it appears that she'll be a significant part of the Númenórean storyline in The Rings of Power. It appears that Míriel will experience visions of Númenor's eventual destruction. It's also reported that Míriel will be a queen during the events of the show, though her father is still alive. It's not yet known why this might be. It's said that she'll be a savvy, intelligent, and compassionate ruler, and will see action in at least one battle after joining the Númenórean expedition to Middle-earth. It's clear that the show's version of Míriel will have much more impact on the history of Middle-earth than her literary counterpart. Tar-Palantir is unusual among the late kings of Númenor, though his immediate predecessors mistrusted the elves and the godlike Valar. He takes a royal name in the Elvish language Quenya, as well as the Quenyan title Tar, as opposed to Ar, taken from the Númenórean language. This puts him at odds with his own people, who are provoked by Pharazôn into open rebellion. After Tar-Palantir dies, Pharazôn usurps the throne and marries his daughter Míriel. Tar-Palantir is definitely in the show, though he likely won't be a major player. We currently have no idea who will be playing him. Most probably, Tar-Palantir will be an elderly ruler with diminished authority as the series opens. His main purpose will be to open up a power vacuum, allowing the villainous Pharazôn to ascend to the throne of Númenor. The Rings of Power will feature several ancillary Númenórean characters, all of whom are original to the series. The first is Arianne, Isildur's sister, who is played by Emma Horvath. Arianne is set against Isildur's decision to join the Númenórean expedition to Middle-earth. At one point, she chases him through the city streets as he leads his soldiers to war. Finally, there's Kemen. As Pharazôn's son, Kemen will spend Season 1 involved in a romance with Arianne. Kemen is played by Leon Wadham, but it's unclear what his role in the larger story of the Rings of Power will be. As Galadriel narrates the early days of Arda, she speaks briefly about the years of trees and the great wars that dominated the First Age. Shortly after, we meet her brother, Finrod Felagund. As her narration continues, it's revealed that he is one of the great elven warriors determined to end Morgoth's reign of terror in Middle-earth. Much of the introduction to the Rings of Power is condensed, likely because a majority of the story takes place during the Second Age. But the particular battle that Galadriel references might be the culmination of and ultimate end to the First Age. There's a lot to digest here. In Tolkien's writing, Finrod is an elven king and brother of Galadriel. He plays a key role in the events of the First Age and eventually gives his life to save Beren from torture at the hands of Sauron, who at that point is merely a lieutenant of the Dark Lord Morgoth. The battle in question could be the epic Dagor Bragollach, or even a glimpse of Beren's quest for the Silmaril. Unfortunately, most of this material is found in the Silmarillion, which means Amazon Studios can't use it for the series. Luckily, the appendices of The Lord of the Rings do mention a few key details about Finrod, including his familial relationship with Galadriel and the manner of his death. The odds are that Finrod's appearance in The Rings of Power will be relegated to the show's prologue, which, with some clever trickery and editing, could feasibly depict Middle-earth's ancient history without committing copyright infringement. In May 2022, Amazon invited a number of Tolkien fan blogs, websites, and YouTubers to a special event in London where they were introduced to the showrunners and shown footage from The Rings of Power. Information about the event has since started popping up all over the internet. According to several sources, show creators Patrick McKay and John D. Payne told the attendees they have plans for all the characters in the Second Age, specifically naming Celeborn and Celebrimbor as examples. These names will be familiar to fans of The Lord of the Rings. Celeborn is Galadriel's husband, while Celebrimbor is Elrond's ill-fated wife. Neither Celeborn nor Celebrimbor will be appearing in Season 1. For a long time, their absence from the cast list was pretty conspicuous. Now, though, we know that these two characters will simply be making their debut at a later point. This makes total sense, considering how many characters are due to appear in the series. It stands to reason that a few may need to be kept off the board for a while. And, if nothing else, it's greatly reassuring to know that the storytellers behind The Rings of Power know exactly where their tale is headed.